Well, hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. You guys will probably not notice this, but we did take 2 weeks off, and we took 2 weeks off. And that was not a planned 2 weeks off. It was because we were moving over here and I was overwhelmed. So there's no good excuse except to say, we missed you guys. And several of our listeners, Anne, are like, hey, are you guys ever coming back?
Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Right. And now it's April. So tell us about Toronto in April.
Oh, no. Well, the premier actually just reinstated another lockdown for the month of April.
Kidding. That just keeps going on and on for you guys.
We for 28 more days, and because we're hitting our third wave. So
What does the vaccine situation look like up there?
It's good, but it's slow.
Yeah.
So that's the shame is yeah. I don't know what's going on, but I think they want everybody to get their first shot and then for everybody to wait and then for everybody to get their first shot and then do another round of the second shot. So that's interesting.
Okay.
That's an interesting strategy.
Yeah. Okay, but you're still getting out yourself and getting some
Yes.
fresh air and good.
Yes.
Happy for yourself. It's good. Yeah. Well, yeah. And I think, around here, I think too, the weather makes everything feel a little bit more, everybody's a little bit happier, even in the midst of that. So, and I have to tell you that you guys, we're taping this only a few days after April Fool's Day. And I don't know if I told you guys this. My favorite holiday is actually April Fool's. And so it was great. And we celebrated. I had a great time, like tricking people and
you should ask everybody else who was the recipient of your celebration.
I know, they don't love it. They don't love it. I'm going to be honest. But,
what'd you do?
But I'm going to keep doing it every year. Oh, I made big signs and put it on people's cars and TP'd their cars. And, I had all of my inappropriate noisemakers and it was great. But
I love it.
But anyways, it's great to be back with you guys. We missed you. And I am very excited about our guest today. And I feel really honored, Ian, that you're joining us. Welcome to the podcast, Ian Hockley. How are you?
I'm doing great, Laurie. Hi, Anne.
And Ian, you have a great accent. So where is your accent?
It is from England.
England, yeah.
That's where I spent the first 40 years of my life.
Okay, but you're in Connecticut now. You're not in England.
But where in England?
Originally a little village called Eastry, a little dot on the map. But it's not far from Cambridge. People might know that's quite a big city, so not far from there.
Yeah, good. And Ian is head of this great and founder of this great nonprofit called Dylan's Wings of Change, which you launched as a result of your son, who was killed in the Sandy Hook killing in 2012, right? So you're going to tell us a little bit about that. But I love your organization, Ian. I hopped on your website, and my mom actually donated to your website a couple years ago or something like that. And so she was very excited that we were having you on the podcast as well. But we're going to talk all about great things like empathy and change and leadership and kind of anti-bullying stuff, all this great stuff, raising a great generation, right, of people. And so Ian, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself? I mean, you just mentioned you grew up in England, but tell us a little bit about your growing up and then kind of get us to the point of 2012 when kind of your life really changed and get us to that moment.
Sure. And, Laurie, when I'm speaking in public, I'll often try and start light, and I'll say, in the country where I grew up playing football, with your foot and a ball. And, moving to America where you play it with your hands and an egg. But if we call it football or we call it soccer, it's often called a game of two halves. Like the first half can be going great, you're celebrating success, and at halftime, something goes wrong. And suddenly you're losing, and you've got that decision to are we going to fight for this and pull back, or are we giving up? And the first half was wonderful. Growing up in England, a lovely little village, it was that idyllic little village. Didn't need to lock your doors. The kids were out playing, past dusk, and Loving family that got me to college. There weren't many in our family who'd gone to college. It's not as common in England to go as is in America. So I got to college, which got me a good job. I'd met a wonderful woman at college. She was on exchange from America, Nicole, and she ended up coming back to England and we got married. And so we both started our careers. We were in the city of Norwich in the east of England, equally a beautiful place to live. And after moving around the country a bit, chasing our careers, we kind of settled and had two wonderful boys, Jake and Dylan. And kind of that dream, that idyllic life continued because we then got to move to America. I was working for IBM and they moved our family over. I'd been coming here for years on vacation, both with my family and then with Nicole and the boys. Nicole was born in Rhode Island and Jake's birthday was the 4th of July. So it was kind of like coming home, and we picked this beautiful village of Sandy Hook to come and live in and make that fresh new start.
Okay. All right. And so that was, what year was that you moved over?
January 2011, so just over 10 years ago.
Okay. All right. Okay. And okay, so then take us through the next year, right? You're living in Sandy Hook and life is wonderful. You're still at IBM, right? And then tell us about that kind of the next year, and then take us through that.
That year was equally wonderful. The boys get a great start at the school. You know, Jake goes into first grade, and then Dylan goes to preschool, and then he eventually comes to Sandy Hook. And Dylan had autism. That was one of the things that made him really special. And they had a great program there for kids with special education needs. And he had Anne-Marie Murphy, who was his aide. And that was perfect for the kids. My job was going well. Nicole was looking at some business startup opportunities, and we were making so many great friends. You know, we were blessed to move to a good neighborhood with lots of young families, and we made lots of adult friends who had kids around the same age. Then everything was perfect. Everything was perfect.
Yeah.
And then first half, second half.
Yeah.
That second half started December 14th, 2012. And I got up early because it was at IBM and we were in budget season, and I probably up at 5:30, checked on the boys, got in the car and drove to the offices. And so they weren't even awake that morning. And I got an email from the school system, and it just popped up and it just said, Newtown schools are in lockdown. And I just pressed delete because I didn't know what that meant. It didn't register. It didn't even register, is this a drill or not? It didn't register. And I carried on working for a good hour, people coming and going. But my boss came into my office and just double checked. He knew our family, and he's like, the boys go to Sandy Hook School, right? And I'm like, that's right, Bill. And just the look on his face, you can tell when someone is both hiding something and really super scared. And he's like, we have to go. And he takes me to his car and he's driving me back. It's a 40-minute drive. We probably did it in 30 minutes. And he's driving fast and I'm getting texts. And Nicole is texting saying she's been called to the firehouse and there's something going on. So I'm in the car and, you know, the phone is here and I'm scrolling through social media and just seeing all it says is, you know, lockdown at school. And remember, Newtown has half a dozen schools. We didn't know anything at that point. But then it says lockdown at Sandy Hook, shooting at Sandy Hook, principal has been killed. Like, it's just all in that 30 minutes. And we arrive at the firehouse. And the firehouse is a lovely white building just outside the gates of Sandy Hook School. Sandy Hook Firehouse is there. And for a start, the streets are just news trucks, fire trucks, police, ambulance. So we had to work our way through that. And I'll admit, we got there quite late. You know, the children that had been evacuated from the school had been reunited with their parents at the firehouse, and most of them had gone. So there were just people left milling around, law enforcement, parents. I met Nicole, and she just said, well, I found Jake. And our friends took him, they've gone bowling, but we can't find him. And the first thing we could think is, okay, we've heard there's a shooting. He's scared of loud noises. he'll have run out of the building. Like, he'll have just bolted and gone. We just got to sit and wait, and they'll find him. Then through the morning and the rest of the afternoon, more people arrive, more parents of teachers, and we're just kept in the building. And there's an update every hour just to say there's a situation and we'll let you know when we can. And eventually the governor arrived, and he was the one to lead the discussions. And there must have been 50 people in the room, as I said, parents, aunts, uncles. And at that point, I think the frustration boiled over and the questions started getting more targeted, and we wanted to know why we were there and what was going on and where were the teachers and the children. And it's like the governor almost collapsed himself and said, if you're here, it's because the person you're waiting for is dead. Mm-hmm. And there was that moment where everything stood still. And I don't know how long that lasted. And then someone screamed and people fainted, and it was pandemonium.
Yeah. Well, Ian, I remember when it happened. Like, I remember watching the news, and I mean, for me, it does rank up there with 9/11, where it's like one of those moments where I remember like where I was. And at the time, like, we didn't have kids. Like, our kids are 7 and 9 right now. And so it's right before we had our kids. And I just remember thinking, I'm like, what are the parents going through right now? Like, my heart was just like broken. And so, talk to us about like those few days after, and then, because part of Dylan's Wings of Change is, I mean, you just had like, I mean, people, the way that sometimes like they offer their grief to others is through giving, right? And so you're like this emotions, but then also you have like this money, right? That's kind of pouring in to help. And so tell us about like the, like the days after, and just kind of all the, I can only picture it in as like frenetic, kind of like this frantic, frenetic, overwhelming, like what's happening. Like what were those first few weeks, days, months like?
The next 48 hours are just a blur. We actually didn't go back to our house. We stayed with some friends where Jake had gone back with. And the next thing I really remember is getting dressed in my best suit because we're going to the high school for the Monday because the president is coming. And President Obama led a vigil at the high school. And he talked about the need for change. Now, I know he was talking about violence and gun laws and mass shootings, but I just heard change. And one thing that I really was pivotal, there was a lady, she was actually with the president's bodyguards, and the victim's family sat at the front of Newtown High School auditorium where they held it, and it was packed. And we got to sit at the front. And if anybody in our group was overcome, and they were as the service went on, this lady would work her way along. She'd hold their hand. She'd whisper with them and calm them down. And I became fascinated with this as this is going on. And I actually introduced myself afterwards. And she asked if she could come and visit our family on the Tuesday. So that was the Monday. On the Tuesday morning, we visited the funeral home. It's the first time we got to see Dylan because the funeral was the Wednesday. And then this lady, Laura, came to our house. And we invited her in, and we sat and we talked about Dylan. Nicole and I sat and talked for a couple of hours. And we just shared stories about him and how he used to like to flap. He would jump up and down, he'd flap his hands when he got excited. And once he described himself to Nicole as a beautiful butterfly because she asked him why he flapped. And Laura talked about the butterfly as a symbol of change, this transformation from the ugly caterpillar into the beautiful butterfly. And so that stuck with us. And Laura actually stayed almost through the week. She kept coming back. She came to Dylan's funeral and gave us these butterfly brooches. I don't know where she got them. And then she came back for his memorial service. So we had the funeral on the Wednesday, a small affair. But on the Friday, a local church put on a big memorial celebration of life, and 1,000 people came. And we had readings and some beautiful songs. And Nicole and I got up and talked, and we talked about the butterfly effect. We talked about Dylan's flapping. But the butterfly effect is where small changes accumulate and can have a massive impact. The butterfly flaps its wings and can cause a hurricane. So all these things are going on through that week. And then at the end, Jake released 26 Balloons into the Sky, and we had the pipers from the New York Port Authority band play Amazing Grace, which is what we played at my grandmother's funeral, and it's beautiful. And then we took a vacation because that was a lot, and we left town for Christmas.
Yeah. And who was Laura? Was she a counselor?
She was actually President Obama's faith advisor, religious advisor. She was connected with the White House.
Okay.
We stayed in touch for a couple of years, and then she went on a mission to Africa and doing great work still.
That's interesting. She almost reminds me of kind of some like an angelic presence, right? Like going and comforting person to person.
You're very right.
It's a powerful image. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the beginning of Dylan's Wings of Change. And like how did it begin? How did your vision begin? Tell us about the early days.
Yeah, there was all that money donated. As you say, when people don't know what to do, they can give. Money creates change. For 3 months, we did nothing, and we just tried to piece back together what we could of our day-to-day. But the people in charge of the bank account said, you have to do something. This money's been donated. Do you hand it off to a community foundation and tell them what you want done? Or do we do something ourselves? We thought we would do something ourselves. So Dylan's Wings of Change, the wings are the butterfly's wings, and change is what we wanted to create. We had an initial mission. Let's take that money and help kids like Dylan get the best start in life. He was getting such great support. Money will help get support. So we spent a couple of years donating that money to small organizations who couldn't get grants, who struggled to raise money themselves, because we had Dylan's memory and people were still donating. And we did that for a couple of years. And that was great. But through that time, we're also seeing not just the kids we're helping, but all kids struggling with social isolation, exclusion, antisocial behavior, and losing their way and getting lost and getting into dark places. And I've talked about it since 2015 as that was an epidemic of social isolation, and now we're in this pandemic now. But that epidemic has an antidote, and that antidote is empathy. That empathy is the thing that will help others reach out and connect with those that are disaffected, disconnected. And so we started working on programming that would build empathy.
I just want to say, I just, obviously, I really admire your response, because I think people, whenever they have crisis or tragedy, they have a choice, right? You can veer off and like go into super dark places yourself or not. And I was really admiring, honestly, that you had still like the personal wherewithal to see and observe the themes, like the butterfly, right? And also how to honor Dylan and his joy. I mean, I could just imagine the flapping, and you're like, yes, please, more flapping. And so then I just think that's really beautiful. And so I just want to say really thank you for doing that. Yeah. And then did you have anything, like, honestly, I think that this has been a year of grief and loss. So if we could just back off a little bit and just, if you could, do you have any words of wisdom or advice for us who are really suffering?
And it was my friends, our friends formed this protective wall around us. They checked on us, they lifted us up. And I think because of the scale of the tragedy, they felt they would go and do whatever they needed to do. And so my heart goes out to those people who go through grief or tragedy and don't have that support network, and to do whatever they can to reach out and get help from at least professional services that provide that. And this pandemic has forced grief upon so many people in so many tragic ways that people can't even see their loved ones as they're losing them. Or it may not be COVID, but they still can't get to them. I struggled to read. We were sent so many books about the grief, and I struggled to read them because all I could understand is it's a journey, and it's a journey each one of us almost has to find their own way individually, because some days you get lost or you end up backtracking, and some days you think you're making great progress. But that's my journey, and it's not someone else's journey. and more just to think of what is this thing we feel that's grief. And the best one I have is the description: the grief is love with nowhere to go.
Mm.
And
Mm.
and that's why it hurts so much, because love is the most powerful emotion, right, we have. It's just them, love can help people do amazing things, and therefore if it's just stuck inside you, right, it just hurts. It just hurts so much. So, and it may be those people who can take that, as you said, not go into the darkness but do things, they just find a way to let the love out, and as it gets out, it does good things. It's not necessarily that person's strength, but it's just that they use their love.
Ian, that is probably one of the best definitions of grief I've ever heard. That it's love with nowhere to go. And I think of like an echo chamber, right? Where that's like the worst kind of echo chamber too, right? Where it's like we're socially isolated, whether it's because we choose to be or because we don't know where, who to open up to, who to tell, who's part of that process, whatever. So it's like this cyclical pattern over and over and over. And when you're talking about kids who are socially isolated, all of that, like that is like devastating, right? To think of kids who are going through this. I remember, Ian, at the beginning of the pandemic last year, I remember that somebody was commenting about this woman who was out with her daughter at the grocery store and saying, why does she take her daughter to the grocery store? And it was a judgment. I mean, it was very clearly, she should have left her daughter at home. Her daughter didn't need to be out. What's happening? Why can't you just order food to be delivered? This whole thing. And there was this whole long conversation about, what we don't know, what we can't see is what's real and what's important. We can't see if that her daughter had to come with her because of parental issues, or if there's some kind of abuse issues, she was keeping her safe, whatever. And so I love that you're talking about empathy as kind of like our top calling. And so I would like for you to describe what empathy means to you. And I think there's this belief that people are born empathetic, or they have to go through the exact thing to be empathetic. And so, one, describe what empathy is to you. And then also, what does it look like to cultivate empathy for all of us?
Yeah, definitely. And it's the both at the core of what we try to do, but also that is the end of another journey. So what it means to me is, and in the work we've done, hearing at least so many definitions, right? The classic, it's to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, right? To be able to understand how someone is feeling, but then also, to relate to it. As you said, it may not be the same thing, right? I lost a child in a tragic way. Someone may not have been through that, but they may have lost a loved one anyway, or even their cat that they loved and was their world. That it's that empathy is just knowing that you're going through something and just telling that person, I get it and I'm here for you. I think the best one for me has always been the difference between sympathy and empathy, because they're so close in their letters.
Mm-hmm.
Someone is stuck in a hole. They're in a pit, a dark pit. And so a sympathetic person, someone with sympathy, will look in the hole and go, I'm so sorry you're in the hole, but have a nice day. Whereas the person with empathy just jumps in the hole and says, I was stuck in a hole once. It was bad, but you know what? I got out, and I'll be here with you until you get out.
Mm.
That's the empathy piece.
Yeah.
And in terms of, I love where you talk about, this is something to be fostered, cultivated. Mm-hmm. You can think of a young child, an innocent child, as actually being very empathetic. They look at everything in the world. They just want to connect. Everything is wonder. But something can happen during our life that all the softness goes away, and we get these hard edges, and that takes it away. So how do we foster empathy? We start with exactly what we do with young kids in elementary school: kindness, respect, gratitude and generosity, please and thank you.
Mm.
We build. They understand what compassion is, hope, resilience, courage, right? These are the building blocks. And then empathy and love really are at the top of that pyramid. And so it's a long journey. And I don't ever think you can teach it. I don't think you can, certainly can't read a book about it or just do a skit. Oh, look, there's someone being empathetic. You got to experience it. Either someone showing you, right, that being empathetic towards you, or having that opportunity with all the right circumstances that your empathy can blossom. And it's linked to a couple of other things that, we'll talk about, which is bravery and courage, definitely, because I think the two are so definitely intertwined.
Yeah.
So that's empathy for me.
It's interesting because all those things you're talking about, kindness, compassion, all this, what I think of is like, first and foremost, acknowledging the other, like acknowledging other people around us. And so tell me what you think of this, Ian. But I love the practice. I'm already like trying to bias you, but I love the practice of like just sitting and observing people. Like if you go somewhere, like go to a grocery store, just sit on a bench and like watch people. Because I think that the more we train ourselves to notice other people and kind of how are they doing, their manners, their facial expressions, all this, it becomes more natural. Like, I don't know if that's a way of training or not, but is that part of this too, is just kind of teaching people that other people matter most? I mean, would you say that is part of this, or is that, like, how does that rank in terms of what you're doing?
Really highly up there. If I jump into, Wingman is our program. Yeah. We named it Wingman because in the Air Force, that's the pilot that's looking out for you, right? Taking care of other people is looking out for the squadron. So we want the kids and the adults in our program, exactly as you said, be thinking about other people and their needs and their wants before yourself. But we approach it in a very systematic and sequenced way. You don't throw people into situations that put them out of their comfort zone. So we work very much with people's comfort zones and what they're comfortable with. But we love working with groups in person, and it takes days, right? This is not a let's read this worksheet. No, we all understand kindness now. We start with very simple conversations where people can just share, maybe one-to-one. Let's have a topic. What does empathy mean to you? Or even simply, what's your favorite color? How did you get that name? Where do you live? Where do you come from? And that sharing in small pairs just helps people find their voice. And they also see, as you said, they see the person opposite them. So they're already practicing that. And then the activities gets bigger. The level of trust grows. You often hear the phrase safe space, right? That's what you need. You need people who trust each other. And when that trust builds, they can be their authentic selves. And we should probably talk more about being your authentic self. But the idea is now people trust those around them. They can share more openly, and they start to see each other and not just see each other, but see the real each other, because they can drop the mask we all wear 24/7, the mask that is our Instagram feed, all right? That perfect life that we all live. And they start to connect with each other very genuinely. So our program is all activity based. People interacting, whether it's just a one-to-one discussion or the whole group, with a challenge to complete a task that might involve a silly large playing card on their head that they don't know what it is because they've just been put there, and they have to get in order from ace to king without speaking, but communicating and helping each other. And when they're forced to rely on each other, then they see each other's qualities, and when they talk about it, and I will get super excited, because the power of our program is in the time people take afterwards to share their experience and what they saw and they heard and how they felt. And when they talk about how people helped each other, and how we watch a group of 20 plus kids from right across the school who've been brought together, who probably don't know each other too well. And by the end of day 2 with us, they're hugging each other and they don't want us to leave. And they're like, this is the best day of school ever. But also they're talking about how they can now relate to each other. how they feel they've found a friend where they never had one before, or how they realize that they have a duty to other people. That's the magic.
Wow.
But it's taking the time
Mhm.
to do it. And in this culture we have where everything pretty much has to be done within 5 minutes or we're on to the next thing, that's what we're pushing back against. And that we take the time to allow people at their own pace to really connect with each other.
That's great. So I'm just getting a picture of how you guys work, and it's really countercultural in a few ways, I think, in powerful ways. Like, honestly, I think the fact that you're doing it in person, so that you're doing it with your presence, and I think you just even being there makes people feel less lonely.
Mm.
And then also just your like value of authenticity, and just like it breaks my heart when people well, with Instagram or whatever, or TikTok, whatever, they have a filter. So it's kind of like taking off that filter, and then so many people are going to like plastic surgery because they want to look like their filter, but that's not possible. So I think society just has this like crazy unrealistic expectation on us, and that is like the pressure is huge, but then how to encourage people to actually accept who they truly are without the filter and be their true selves, that's incredible work. So then do you guys like mostly work in schools, or I mean, yeah, anyway.
And pre-COVID, certainly COVID forced us to go virtual, and we did. We ran small workshops, open invite. People all around the country would just come on, and we'd have them do little games and activities through Zoom. But in person is where it's at. And we started school. They were just started small, just a couple of schools. But by the time COVID hit, we had 50 schools in Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey. Still small, but very committed. And we were training students to be the leaders. So they would be the activity leader in the classroom with their peers. So again, instead of an adult saying, hey, we're going to do this activity and this is the way it's going to go, you had students going in saying, here's our challenge. How can we do this? So both that peer leadership model and using their own language, because who am I to say to a kid, a young person, what respect means? They have to work that out for themselves, and that will mean something different for kids in Connecticut to kids in Toronto or out where you're, Laurie, in Indiana, right? It's different everywhere because it's your culture, it's your background. So that's a great power of in person. Because the screen, sadly, screen disconnects us, but the screen disconnects everyone these days, and so we're looking to reconnect.
Yeah. Well, I wish that somebody would like force me to go to like a team building, like a week-long team building. I'd be like, I'm all there, but nobody ever asks me anymore, Ian.
And that's what we do when we do it with adults. It's very much used. I've worked with groups of principals and superintendents, and it is that because they're all go, 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 busy, busy, and they just take that time again to see each other. But we'll throw them into challenges that test their skills of strategy and planning and executing strategy. But again, we're playing with big playing cards stuck on their heads, but it's real world results from these very organic activities.
Yeah, so good. So, okay, so Ian, on your website, you have these guiding principles, and I really like them. And a number of them align with our hero making traits. Like you're talking about integrity, you're talking about courage. I think we should add authenticity. It's not actually one of our hero traits, but it should be. And empathy and all that. So I'm going to quickly read your bullet points, and then I want to talk about bravery and courage, like in particular, because I really like that word bravery. And so I want you to kind of flesh that out for us a little bit. So here's your guiding principles. Empathy must be nurtured. Change is hard. Yes, totally true. Failure is part of growth. Yes, 100% true. Integrity is essential. Anyone can be a leader, and experiential learning is best. So you're talking about the experiential learning, working together. Talk to us about just about like, I don't know where, I'm trying to remember where I saw bravery and courage, but I know I saw it. And so talk to us about how courage fits in with what you do and bravery. Talk to us about that.
Sure. And you would have seen that, and under Wingman, we say inspiring
Okay.
empathy, hope, and courage.
Yes. Okay, good. Yeah.
And I think for a start, courage is that thing that takes our empathy outside of us to help other people. I may see someone struggling, but they may look differently to me. They may scare me, right? If it was someone that I don't recognize, or in any other circumstance I'd be scared of. My bravery will allow me to reach out and help that person and connect with them, even though I am scared, right? So bravery overcomes that fear. I am not too well versed how one develops courage, but I am sure the more adversity one faces in one's life, if one overcomes it, one develops a level of courage because you have that lived experience of that challenge that you came through. So maybe we should all look at our lives and of those of our loved ones and say, do they have enough adversity? I'm sure enough people have enough adversity in their life, but everybody needs some of it. And for those of us where life is good, it can be too good, and without adversity we don't develop that courage, because at some point in our life that tragedy may come, and are we strong enough to deal with it?
Well, and I think that maybe that's where observing other people, and even as they go through adversity. Like, I think of my daughters. This is a very simple analogy, but like my daughter, she does gymnastics. And so she has, when she first started doing it, her hands were like they got super calloused, and like they were a mess. And then like the callus started to become like not as bad, right? The more she did it. And then it normalized her hands so that when she does it, it doesn't hurt. Like, it's just it's kind of building us, like you're saying, adversity, difficulty, pain, what you've gone through. I haven't gone through what you've gone through, but I've gone through my own trials. They're ideally, like, they make us stronger, right? They make us more able to be empathetic and courageous and care for people. And then I think that leads us to be authentic too, because the more we share our stories like you did, I mean, your story was unfortunately very public, but it also, like as Anne said earlier, it's very redemptive. Like, I mean, it's just incredible what's come out of your pain, that you had to allow yourself to kind of be in the place where you're like, okay, I'm going to absorb this pain for the sake of other people too. I'm going to use this for other people, right? So, okay, integrity. Let's finish on integrity, because I love integrity. It's for me, this is my definition, Ian, and then you're going to counter with your definition. For me, integrity is being the same person inside as you are outside. That's the definition I use. So what is your working definition, and why is integrity so important?
Sure. I like that one. I'd say for me, integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking. And but equally, it's that personal truth that you carry with you, and integrity is the bedrock of trust. Okay, if you can't trust someone, you will not rely on them. Like that friend that says they're going to pick you up and then leaves you in the rain. I can't trust you to pick me up. Your integrity says, I will be there. I committed to this thing, or indeed, I'm sorry, dude, I can't be there. I'll get you an Uber or something, right? So so that personal truth, as you said, inside and out, is the same. I was brought up to always believe in the rules, to not break the law. Although we didn't grow up in an organized religion, it was always to be a good human. I developed my adult integrity through my first job at Price Waterhouse. We were auditors and financial work, and therefore you had to make decisions about right or less right. And as an auditor, that's what you had to do. So I had to learn integrity as part of my job, and it's carried on with me. So to develop it in people, it's almost like it needs to be tested. Young people, to be in situations where their integrity is tested. Again, in our games and activities, there are some that can be set up where there's inherent dishonesty as possible in the game. There's one called Saboteur where that can happen. But to experience it in a genuine way, but then able to talk about it, because that was just a piece of fun. It's okay. We weren't being dishonest in a malicious way, but now we see what dishonesty is. Now we see what integrity is. So I think in all of these things, to develop them, almost creating a sandbox that young people can play in, see what it feels like, test drive it, and then say, okay, and in the real world, now I understand that. It's almost like the vaccine. You get the shot just to develop a resistance to it. You know, we won't know what kindness is until we experience it. Reading a definition, don't know. So how do we let people experience all these things?
Your definition of integrity is great because it requires being tested. Because you're like, oh, I'm such an integral person, you know, I'm such an honest person, and then you're tested and you're like, am I honest? Do I have integrity? And that's when you're then you have that decision. You have to step up to the plate and make some ethical decisions. So I really appreciate that. I was thinking this whole conversation with you, it's kind of like our understanding and approach to suffering and tests. And so I think that we have been taught, maybe as a society, to run away from suffering, run away from pain, run away from tests as much as possible. Avoid, avoid, avoid. If I have a headache, or cover, you know what I mean? If I have a headache, I'm just going to take Tylenol or something, but I'm not going to address the issue. I'm just going to cover it instead of addressing the issue, which actually might be better, you know, to address the source of the pain. We're just going to cover it. And so I think that I'm not saying run towards the pain. Let's not just be masochistic about it, but I think it's way better for us to actually address the source of the issue, and also to acknowledge that there is pain and suffering, and that there are kids that are really lonely or like really are bullied, and then, or why are people bullying? You know what I mean? It's like, why don't we talk about that and address the issue instead of saying stop bullying? Well, people are in pain. I think that, so we need to address the pain, not cover up, you know. So that's what I'm just going to say there.
That, okay, Anne, can I talk on that? Because I think you've hit something there, that we talk about this thing called bullying. I am not a fan of the phrase anti-bully, because I always feel anti is pushing against something, and when you push against something, it pushes back, and it pushes back harder sometimes. And if we talk about bullies, are we giving them what they want, which is attention and status? Like, I'm the bully. Absolutely, they need to be understood, and there is a reason what is going on here. But if we focus on the positivity and how great everything can be for the whole, while taking care of the people that are down and feel their only answer to what's going on in the world is this antisocial behavior, we can see massive change. We do an activity, can I share? It's called a gallery walk. It's a common activity. We put essential questions on huge post-it notes, and all our participants write their answer to these questions anonymously. So we just get a sheet full of answers. And we would ask them, what does empathy mean to you? What do you love about your school? What do you wish you could change? What behaviors are you seeing? We added a new one 2 years ago. What behaviors are you seeing in adults that you do not like, and how can we help them? That page is always full. And when you look at it, and you look at the one where they say the behaviors in their school, you might as well just draw lines between the two.
Like, what are some examples of that, Ian?
Just when they use the word bullying, the words we use, right? Anyone from middle school up, if you have access to social media, you hear what our leaders, our politicians, that are our celebrities are saying and doing. And when you see those self-same behaviors in kids, I honestly don't know how we can punish a kid for those behaviors when you see those exact same things in adults. All we can do is blame ourselves. The fix starts with us. And if we are not prepared to not be fighting, yelling at each other on Twitter, then who are we to tell our kids not to do that? It literally is do as I say, not do as I do. And that pains me the most.
Yeah. I love that. Like, we have to hold ourselves responsible is what you're basically saying, right? Like,
which then brings us back to integrity.
Which brings us back to So, Ian, what have you learned over the past 9 years? What are some just of the lessons that you've learned personally doing this?
That there's a few. That there is so much good in the world. When there is so much darkness, we have to realize that there are those people that profit from that. That there are leaders, that there are corporations that sell fear. That because that sells things or gets people to follow them. And that actually the light and the love is where we should be putting our attention. And if we could, those other things would wither and die. It's all about where we put our focus. I think that the power of friendship is one of the strongest. I always took my friendships for granted. They're friends. We'd go out, we'd hang out, we'd go play, we'd go run. Whereas now, friendships are what has got me through these past few years, and therefore to always try and ensure that everybody has a support network. We may not all have friends, close friends, best friends, but just a support network that you can turn to when things are bad, and to find those kids especially, because they will turn into adults that don't have a support network, and then when things go bad, then they'll hurt themselves, they'll hurt others, they'll kill others. So how can we reach those people? Those are the two for me. Find the light, find the helpers, find the love.
Find the helpers, Mr. Rogers, right? Look for the helpers. Yep. Well, Ian, how could we support you? How could people support Dylan's Wings of Change?
Check us out. Head to the website. We will travel to do our programs wherever we need to, in the post-COVID world, but even virtually and remotely. And we'll help a community do what it needs. It might be a group of kids in a school. It might be a sports team that wants to get more camaraderie. It might be a group of adults. We've worked with youth services organizations because they want to work on their equity and inclusion. We'll help groups get to where they want to be, whether they want to improve their team bonding, or they want to tackle difficult problems, or they just want to have some fun playing games. Yeah. That is our mission. That is our mission, to build these communities, to foster the empathy. Yeah. Donations always accepted. We love that because we're still a nonprofit. But more, we just love to work with people because teams, that's what we're about. Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Okay, so if you guys are listening and you have a team, then Anne is raising her hand, but go ahead, Anne.
I really like the fact that you said you travel, Ian, because recently when Lori and I had Dion Dawson as our guest, we talked about having a Heromakers retreat.
Oh, that's right, we did. Ian.
Lori and I haven't talked about this yet, but I thought it'd be amazing if we took, some of our Heromakers and brought us together to have an incredible retreat weekend.
With Ian leading us.
I will facilitate a little bit of fun, and then it would be amazing to meet some of the other people that you have.
That would be fun. And we do want to open up to other people as well, but maybe that'll be like a fall 2021 goal that we could work towards. Great idea, Anne. And if any of our listeners are interested in that, please shoot us a message because we want to. I just love what you're doing, Ian. I just love it. I'm just, cheering you on over there. So we invite you guys to check out Ian's website, dylanswingsofchange.com. We'll link to all of your website, your social media, all of that in our show notes. And we encourage you guys to support Ian in his great work. And if you know of a group that is looking for some bonding, leadership, empathy building, if you guys know of individuals who need help in that, then point them Ian's way. And Ian, thanks for being on the podcast with us. This was a joy to have you. I consider you a true hero maker. You're courageous and you're empathetic, and you have suffered well for the sake of others. So thank you. And thanks you guys for listening. If you like this episode, please give us 5 stars wherever you listen and share it with your friends. And we will see you guys next time.